Who is the most underrated actor of all time?
It's Dolph Lundgren.
Correct. Why?
Well, because of his spiky hair and his ice-cold demeanor and his big muscles.
Absolutely.
I must break you.
Welcome to I Must Break This podcast. This is the Fan Podcast, celebrating the cinematic career of action legend Dolph Lundgren.
Hello and welcome back to I Must Break This podcast, the Fan Podcast that celebrates the films of action icon Dolph Lundgren. I'm your host Sean Malloy, and today is another special bonus episode. Now, before we get to today's interview, I just wanted to give a shout out to everyone who has graciously appeared on the show over the course of the past year. A year ago, I started up this show as the ultimate tribute to one of my favorite action stars of all time, Dolph Lundgren. Over the course of the year, I've had the privilege of building some great friendships and getting in touch with many who've had a hand in working alongside Lundgren himself. From actors to writers and directors, it has been an absolute honor for a fan like myself to speak with so many who've had a hand in helping make some of my most cherished films. So as we mark this one-year anniversary, I wanted to say thank you to every one of my co-hosts, as well as all of the interviewees who I've chatted with. This has truly been a dream come true, and I couldn't be more excited to seeing the show continue to grow. Now, on to today's episode. Recently, I had the pleasure of speaking with the ultimate man of action, Anthony DeLongis. DeLongis is a true Renaissance man. He's an actor, stuntman, horseman, voice actor, and fight choreographer with expertise in bladed weapons, the bullwhip, and mounted horseback. DeLongis has trained some of the biggest names in Hollywood, including Harrison Ford, Michelle Pfeiffer, Jet Li, Angelica Houston, Bo Derek, Placido Domingo, and Tom Cruise. Fans of the genre may know DeLongis best as the character Blade, the bounty hunter swordsman hired by the villainous Skeletor to track down the heroic He-Man in 1987's Masters of the Universe. In addition to starring in the film, DeLongis also trained He-Man himself, Dolph Lundgren, for the film's sword fights and the epic final battle in the film. Clearly, Anthony DeLongis has a storied career that could be a podcast in itself, thanks to his numerous stories and experiences. So it was an honor being able to speak with this legend of action cinema. DeLongis and I discuss his early days practicing sword mechanics, working on Masters of the Universe, instructing novices in the art of the bullwhip, and his very own Fortress of Solitude, Rancho Indalo, located in Canyon Country, California. Here, DeLongis teaches amateurs to professionals how to be an action hero, or, at the very least, look like one on camera. I hope you enjoy our discussion as much as I did. So, for your listening pleasure, is my conversation with action legend Anthony DeLongis on I Must Break This podcast.
First of all, I wanted to say thank you so very much for taking the time to speak with a fan today. I really do appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. I appreciate your being a fan.
Yeah, I know.
I'm starting to run across people who have no idea, when I start referencing, well, have you seen this? Have you seen this? And I may as well be referencing, John Ford or Akira Kurosawa movies because they have no idea what I'm talking about. But, oh, great. I've lived long enough to where, anybody under 30 doesn't know what the hell I've done in my career.
Oh, man, that's a shame. I mean, because you have had quite an impressive and storied career. And I think I was telling you this when you and I spoke a couple weeks back, just the fact that I honestly feel like you have been living the dream of every 10-year-old boy. I mean, my little boy, for example, he's going to be 3 here in a couple months, and he loves swords. I mean, everything, if we're walking along, he sees a stick, he picks it up, that's a sword. And then if he finds a pillow, that's a shield. I mean, and just the fact that you get to, you're paid for playing with weapons, essentially, and showing those weapons. That's awesome.
Sometimes. I'll be careful because that's kind of how I started.
Okay.
With all that. It was I grew up on, Robin Hood and The Mark of Zorro with Tyrone Power. And, my fencing master was Basil Rathbone's teacher. My fencing master was Maestro Ralph Faulkner. he was a two-time Olympian, and he was the sword master of the stars here in Hollywood. He did the original Prisoner of Zenda with Ronald Coleman, and he's Doug Fairbanks Jr.'s coach, and he was Basil Rathbone's coach. And, he coached a lot of Olympians, and but he was the first of the great teachers in my life, and I studied with him for over a dozen years. As a matter of fact, there's a statue that was made of him that used to be in the school, Falcon Studios. He and his wife, Edith Jane, who was a pretty famous dancer and dance instructor about the same time as Agnes DeMille. And they had a studio together. And this statue, slightly larger than life, although so was Ralph. He was referred to as the boss, by his students. But it's in my living room. I, was blessed with inheriting that. So, he's an inspiration every day. And then the other great teacher that really had a huge effect on me was Guru Dan Inosanto. I trained with him for over a decade. And between the two of them, that's how I created my whip system. The DeLongis rolling loop. Most people yank and crank, and force the whip. And I align the whip and I roll and stab. So it's more efficient. I think it's more accurate because it literally stabs. I have safety factors built into it, and it's a whole lot prettier. I came up with it when I was training Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, and I wanted something that was alluring and hypnotic, but obviously dangerous and powerful like her character. And I've been evolving it ever since. So, and it's more than proven itself. I flew in the face of tradition. Of course, the number of dumb things that are done in the name of tradition is, is legendary. But it has now been, almost 32 years I've been doing this, and I've been doing it in horrible conditions on sets and on horseback and everywhere else. And I have more than proven it, doggone it. And it was very funny that there have been some scientific articles that talk about the conservation of lateral energy and which is at the heart of my system. I didn't know that, of course. I just kind of taught myself to listen to the whip and going, these people are working too hard. The martial arts ideal is maximum return for minimum effort, and that whole yank and crank thing just seemed like it's designed to make a big noise, but that's the lowest bar you can set with a whip. But I was very fascinated with it, thanks to Indiana Jones and the Cyril the Gay Blade. So I ended up teaching myself, and that's why I don't do it like everybody else. To me, it's like a flexible sword. So I have a sword background with it, and then the Filipino footwork, showed me the multiple angles, which is essentially the same as rapier footwork. But so looking at it as a supersonic telescopic blade, my perception of it was different, so the way I do it was different, and I'm very excited. It's a 5,000-year-old tool. It's the first man-made tool to break the sound barrier. Dates to 3000 BC that we know of in both the Chinese and Egyptian cultures, and every culture that ever domesticated animals has had a whip of some sort. And then man being man, goes, wow, what a great tool. Hey, this could be a weapon. So, and yes, it's a very effective weapon, too.
Well, no, and I wanted to ask you, you are an expert in swords and knives and whips, and I'm curious, is there a particular weapon or instrument that you enjoy using and teaching more than the others, or do they all have a special place in your heart?
When I said be careful with your boy, because that's how I started, was every stick is a sword, and yeah. Well, my favorite single-handed weapon is saber. I've been studying Shinkendo under Kaiso Toshishiro Obata and with my sensei Matthew Lynch for 10 years now. Kurosawa films are what got me into choreography back in the 70s. And I feel like I've come full circle because, I've been able to, in 1984, I did the 50-year anniversary production of Rashomon, which started as a stage play. And at the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, which was where I began my career with Shakespeare. And I used to be able to, I could fake it. It looks really cool, but now I actually know what the hell I'm doing. So yeah. I'm always trying to add to my knowledge, because knowledge is choices, and your art is in your choices. And the more things you know, the more the ideas come. I think it's that phrase of luck favors the prepared. Well, keep learning something. It keeps you as young as, well, most of my body's still pretty young, but I've got a mantra. It's like, if I'm not getting better, I'm just getting older, and there's only one of those things I can actually do anything about. So I'm always trying to learn. As far as flexible weapons go, I love the whip. I particularly like the bull whip, but it is a foundation for any flexible weapon I pick up. I can do probably 80% of it with a belt or a scarf, or a sash, or a piece of extension cord, or a rope. The thing about a whip is it has an inner braided core. It has a skeleton, which is why it looks like a cat's tail or a snake. So the energy that you introduce to it is multiplied by its construction, which is at the core of what I do with it. So to answer your question, saber, katana, and whip.
Okay. And now you are an instructor, so you are teaching people, would you say, just about every day of the week? Are you instructing classes?
Not every day of the week. Well, it depends. People come from all over the country. My school here, they told me I had to come up with a cool name, so I call it DPACA, which is DeLongis Performance in Combat Arts. Everything I do comes from a combative background, based on the things I've studied with, people like Maestro Faulkner and Rodin Inosanto and Kaiso Toshishiro Obata. So I'm not making up nonsense techniques, but then I've taken and depending on, basically I can teach somebody from a martial standpoint, or I can teach them from a performance standpoint. But it all comes from the same construction, and I find that both arts complement the other. Performance arts complement how you present your information and how you impart it to students, because you're essentially slowing things down so that they can recognize, the control of the weapon, the control of distance, the control of timing, the sensitivity of the partner's energy, and all of these other choices that but it's the same thing I utilize when I'm trying to create the illusion of combat, by slowing it down and opening it up. I help the audience recognize the jeopardy for the character, but it's coming from, I try as hard as I can to create what would be the correct, the choices I've made are combative. I try to create the environment and the energy for that to be a logical choice for the audience to see. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. When you're so let's say, for example, I'm a regular average guy, and I go to your school and I want to learn how to operate one of these weapons. What are some of the first steps that you take in teaching a novice in handling one of these weapons, whether it be a sword, a dagger, a whip, whatever it may be?
It's funny you asked that. But let me finish your other question. Well, people come to Rancho Indalo. This is where my school is. My school is in my home. We're top of a mountain. Just over the hill from Vasquez Rocks, which is, where Kirk battled the Gorn and what was Planet Vulcan and all that. That amazing geological, how should we put this? The power of nature. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Anyway, we're like 45 minutes north of Universal Studios, but I'm 3 miles up a dirt road. So, this is where my school is, and that's where I teach the European weapons and the Filipino weapons and the Japanese weapons. And we have literally hundreds of acres of amazing cross-country riding because we're back in this little nature enclave, and I've got an on-site gun range, and so there's a lot of things. I've got an archery range and a knife and tomahawk throwing range. I'm in the International Knife Throwers Hall of Fame and the Black Belt Hall of Fame, which are all nice little incentives. But, training at Rancho Indalo, when someone comes in, like I've got a client coming in the end of the month from New York, and then he'll be followed by a client coming in from Paris this will be his 4th time training with us, I think. And every summer we get the Australian Stunt Academy come in for like 12 days for intensive training. This will be oh my goodness, this will be their 12th year. So it depends. If people are local, people come in and train. If people live out of state or, out of the country or want to do intensive training, 3 to 5 days to 10 days, whatever they want to do. The more time I have, the more I can teach somebody. But I'm essentially teaching you how to keep teaching yourself, how to keep training. But to get to your next question, yes, there's weapon-specific adjustments that maximize the effectiveness of each tool and that reference a particular culture. Each weapon has its advantages and its strengths, and each one has its vulnerabilities. But at the core of all of them, there is a structural foundation, and that's what I teach. I'm in the business of being able to impart information quickly and accurately, because working in movies, usually time is what you don't have. So I have distilled, if you will. It's a structural foundation, and in brief, your hand is behind your weapon, your elbow's behind your hand, your body's behind your elbow. If your body's behind your elbow, you have strength through structure rather than effort, rather than muscle. And it's have you ever punched anything?
Oh yeah, of course.
Okay, or have you done knuckle push-ups?
Yes.
Well, when you do that, you have to have skeletal alignment. You have to have your wrist lined up with your fist and your elbow lined up with your wrist, and you have to have your body behind your elbow, or you have a weakness in your structure, and all that energy goes back into you. That punch that you were trying to hit the bag or an opponent with goes into your wrist. It stops at your wrist if your wrist bends. So you break your wrist. So that idea of your footwork is there's 8 angles of attack with a blade. Verticals, horizontals, forehand and backhand. Descending diagonals, forehand and backhand. And ascending diagonal. Makes an asterisk if you visualize that. Okay. And you can cut or thrust along those lines. You can reverse the line. There's all kinds of combinations. But if you want to distill things to a foundational truth, there's only 8 angles. You could say there's 360, but let's say 8. Are you picturing that?
Yes.
Now, that's what your tool is doing. If you don't have a tool, then your body is your striking surface, your fists, your elbows, your knees, your legs. But you're still working within those 8 angles. Some people are able to work their feet in all of those angles. There was a time. Now I kind of let my hands do the upstairs and then the feet do the bottom. But there's that. But if I have a tool, now the tool does that. And the tool is an extension of me. One of the first things I teach people is, without you, the tool is an inanimate object. Once you pick it up, now it's an extension of you, of your will and your skill. But it works for you. The tool isn't what's important. That tool is just something that makes your intention easier. Okay, so that's there's 8 angles of attack. Then you have your footwork. Your footwork is your delivery system and your escape route. And there are 8 angles. There's forward and back. That's linear. And there's all kinds of ways, like in modern fencing, you've got advances and crossovers and padanandas and balestras and lunges. This is just different ways of moving forward and back. You follow? Along the line? Okay, then you have lateral movement, which is get out of the way, step to the side, or profile yourself, or do that. Then you have descending diagonals, which is build a barrier, preferably with a tool, like you're going to parry. So if you build a barrier and get your body behind your elbow, you're able to withstand great force because your entire body is meeting and absorbing that force as opposed to just the strength of your hand. You follow? Okay.
Right.
Those are your descending diagonals. Your ascending diagonals are letting the attacker go where he wants to go, don't be there. So you monitor with the blade. You leave the blade in center line and you move either to the outside or the inside of the attack. That's ascending diagonals. So once again, we have 8 angles. And then there's one other aspect, is a circle. If I move to the left and you counter to the left, nothing has changed. The Spanish call it the lineus infinitus, which is the line of infinity. That's what I did when I did Highlander and I did the mysterious circle. We were utilizing that. But if you think of having eight angles of attack with your tool, your sword, and you have 8 angles of footwork, as your delivery system and your escape route, plus a circle, that's the foundation of everything. And so what I like to do is help people see the big picture so they don't get lost in the minutia, because one lifetime isn't enough to learn everything about any art. But, the more art you study, the more you start to go, oh, I learned this over here. Oh, I recognize this from here. It's just the weapon is slightly different, so the timing and the distance, and the application is slightly different, but what makes it combatively viable is this foundational structure. Wow, I hope you were writing that down.
Yeah. No, but I mean, it certainly makes sense. I mean, because, yeah, like I said, you have experience instructing hundreds of people, with all these weapons and everything, many of which are actors and others are novices. So I imagine everyone is coming into you with a different skill level, I imagine, and you're having to kind of work with that.
I love working with people who have, the more you know, the more fun you are to work with, but it doesn't matter. Everybody's got to start somewhere. But what I do look for is, what do you already know how to do? Like if you play a sport, but I get a lot of people who don't. I get a lot of people who, for whatever reason, I was not terribly physical. I was very awkward, very unphysical. When I decided I want to be an actor, I went, I've got to learn more skills because I want to have more choices. And, the more I can do, the more, the more opportunities I can create for myself. And the nice thing about physical action is you have verbal dialogue, and if you're lucky and get a good author like Shakespeare or, some good playwrights or some good, screenwriters, that is enormously helpful. Physical action is dialogue to me. It should be subject to the same choices. It should drive story and articulate character, or it's a bit like junk food. It's not, emotionally evocative. It doesn't service the project or the performance as well as you can if you're, everything you're doing should be subject to those same choices. What you're looking to do is get an audience emotionally invested in your character. You want them to identify with you. You want them to go, yes, I could do that too if I was, like Harrison Ford is really good at playing an ordinary man in extraordinary circumstances. Whether he's Jack Ryan or Indiana Jones or, he doesn't have superpowers. So he takes a licking and keeps on kicking, but you see him, he's smart, and he has heart, and but I'm always looking to try, you want the audience to go on this journey with you. So you're looking to get them to make an emotional investment in you, and when the audience can see you, the character, performing your own action, it gives you credibility, which is priceless. Like Michelle Pfeiffer has no doubles with the whip, is Catwoman. That's all her. Interestingly enough, none of the professional stunt women, including Kathy Long, who's 5-time world kickboxing champion, none of the ladies came close to her skill with the whip, because she saw I was trying to give her another vocabulary for her performance, and and it shows. So,
yeah,
that was the ideal, where we were. I was there, and she said I want him on set whenever I'm working, because I built her a foundation on it. I gave her such a strong foundation. We had like 6 weeks to train. That we would walk onto the set and look at the obstacles, and we would turn adversity into opportunity. I just kind of go, okay, over here we're going to work in this area, and we're going to stay in the vertical. Okay, but here we got a bunch of crap on the floor, so we're going to move into the diagonal, the horizontal, or whatever. Or like the Ice Princess sequence, we made that up on the spot. I watched a rehearsal. Tim Burton had said, I don't think there's any whip stuff here, Anthony. I went, yes, sir, and I will. So I stood over in a corner and watched them do their first rehearsal, and the the girl's in the chair, and Batman discovers her, and Catwoman suddenly appears and cuts her free, and throws the chair at Batman and grabs the girl and leaves. And I said, after the rehearsal, I said to Michelle, if you were to swing in on your whip and cut her free and dump her, chair in one hand and whip in the other says lion tamer the world over. And she goes, Tim Burton, and Anthony's got an idea, and I'm going, oh, great. And so she dropped in on her whip, she cut the girl free, she dumped her out of the chair, she cracked the whip, she threw the chair at Batman, she wrapped the whip around the girl, pulled her in for a two-shot for her line of dialogue, which was girl talk. And we rehearsed it twice and shot it, and we were done. But that's what you can do if you train the actor, and that's what I like. And I like real skills in real time. CGI is a wonderful condiment. It really shouldn't be the entree, because when the audience sees the performer doing something, it gives you a credibility that you can't get when, unless you're unless you have superpowers, you're subject to the laws of physics. Yeah.
Well, and look, I know that you have answered questions regarding Masters of the Universe many times, but first of all, I have to thank you for contributing to this film. I grew up, and I tell people this all the time, and I'm sure you've heard this from others, but the Masters of the Universe toy line and cartoon series, I literally was raised on it. I remember growing up on that as a little kid, and then seeing the movie at the age of 5, 6 years old was a pretty magical experience. And so the fact that you helped contribute to that, I just have to give you the ultimate props for it. Did you ever think that you'd still be talking about the film Masters of the Universe 30 plus years later?
Not so much. It's actually, in a lot of ways, gotten more recognition in about the last 5 years than I think it did in the first 20. I don't think it got the appreciation it deserved. There were a lot of things that I had no idea were going on. Gary was struggling mightily with. They were constantly trying to shut him down because they didn't have any money. There was a time when the whole crew showed up. They hadn't been paid. They were ready to quit. And Gary goes, "Well, we're here. If we can keep working, we'll get you paid by the end of the day." And his co-producer somehow says, "I don't know where he got the money, but he did." And there were a lot of things that it shouldn't have had to be that way. But I saw it about 5 years ago at the Egyptian. There was a screening, and I think Gary had come in, and girl who plays Tila,
Chelsea Field.
Chelsea Field.
Yeah.
And Robert Tower was there, and the gentleman who was the production designer.
Bill Stout.
Oh, yes. And
yeah.
Bill, and it was very nice, and I just kind of went, this actually holds up pretty good. I had a flood of memories, which is great. And then last year they did a PowerCon in Long Beach, and Gary was there, and Meg Foster came in, and Chelsea Field was back, and and Bill Stout was there. And, I found out a whole lot more stuff about, all the things that had gone on behind the scenes that I had no idea about. And actually, Gary found out a few things about it. Yeah, you probably didn't know this about my wardrobe or about, this situation or, whatever. So that was really a lot of fun. But we had, a great fan turnout and a whole lot of people who, express the same thing that you're expressing, that, how important the film it was to them, and, how it affected them in, such a good way. Val Staples had put this on, and he did a terrific job. I'm often told that, I guess mine's about one of the only characters that isn't in the in the Masters of the Universe lexicon, if you will. He didn't exist before the film. And I was just so thrilled to be able, I mean, one of the questions is, that whole speech about I've waited a long time for this and this and that, and did anybody say anything? Was it in the script? Did Gary? And I said, no, I just made these assumptions that, yep, I'm pretty sure He-Man gave me the eye, and I'm looking for a rematch, and and I invested it with that backstory for me, and Gary must have liked what I was doing because he pretty much left me alone.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. He just I would do something and he must have liked it because he kept rolling. So and I'm going, okay.
Now, were you familiar with the toy line and the cartoon series before the script and the project came your way?
Not so much. I had only it was the time I was doing a lot of theater at the time, and which was very time consuming. I was working down at the Old Globe, and then I was back up here, and I was working in Hollywood, and I started working in film. I started in theater in '73 at the Old Globe, and I started film in '75. And when I was doing as much as I could in both areas, because an actor's always looking for a job. But it's one of the reasons why I developed these other skills was I've had a whole parallel career as an action coordinator or a fight coordinator or, a weapons expert or whatever, because that's why I keep learning because, there were some skills I developed and I knew if I wanted to keep growing in those areas, I'd need to learn more stuff. So, and I like to learn more stuff. So and I was really always, how should I put this? I was always trying to give myself the tools, for my own performances, when I was given the opportunity, and, Masters of the Universe was one of those. When I met Harrison Ford, he called me up. He'd seen my reel, for Crystal Skull, and, I get this phone call, and I'm going, is this Anthony DeLongis? Yes. Why does this voice sound familiar? This is Harrison Ford. Yes, sir, Mr. Ford. Well, I guess we better get you in here, to our senior tape and, brush the dust off my whip skills and this and that. This is very cool. And when the first day we met, he said, I saw your tape. You're an amazing swordsman. I said, well, thank you very much. That was kind of my first, skills that I learned. And when do you want to do a sword picture? Alas, he hasn't done one yet. But anyway, it was a lot of fun.
Well, the character of Blade is one of my favorites. I mean, he's so many fan favorites as well, and you can really tell that you're having a ton of fun playing this particular villain. I'm curious, the character that is on screen that we see, how much of that did you bring to the character compared to what was written in the script? I mean, did you add your own touches to the character of Blade?
Oh yes. Other than lines, there wasn't anything written in the script.
Oh really?
No. I mean, I haven't seen the script in 31 or 32 years, but I don't recall there being anything other than him, We always look, I come from, background of stage, so you always look to the text to see, well, what clues can I get from the text, and you get, okay, we're mercenaries, and a curious quartet, and, so that's the introduction of the character. And I've waited a long time for this, so that we get a sense that, he's had this rivalry with He-Man, but also that, I mean, if whatever the encounter was, he survived it, so there's a certain, I always felt like I taken, which is pretty ambitious, but the idea is if He-Man doesn't have a worthy adversary, then He-Man doesn't get to be He-Man, I'm not Skeletor. Skeletor is, beyond. But as another mercenary, I think is a fighter that I can take him. But and I looked and I saw the weapons. Okay, they gave me 2 swords, and I've got this chainmail, and then I've got all of this crap on that makes it really difficult for It looks cool, but I don't know if you knew my what my chainmail was made of.
No.
That was 10 6-foot lengths of pipe cut into 1/4-inch pieces and then trimmed. So I'm wearing about 50 feet of pipe, probably. It was heavy, and I'm in a surgical rubber suit. So, once I got the suit on, I wouldn't take it off again until we wrapped. So I might be in the suit 12 hours. I would peel it down, to try to cool off on certain, when we had a lunch break or whatever. But I would literally pour water out of my boots with my perspiration, like I'm in a river. And, but I looked at it. I had the chain mail. I had the things. I had the projectile, the sort of little, the little rockets, the propelled darts coming out of, around my gauntlet. And then I had the knives, around my leg that I got to use on. That little moment with, he went on to be Lieutenant Paris, and then he produced Chuck. His name just flew out of my head. Who plays Courtney Cox's boyfriend? In each way, there in that moment where Evelyn, puts the collar on him so that he's helpless.
Right.
Robert Duncan McNeil. So that was the first time I met Robert Duncan McNeil, and then when I guest starred on Star Trek Voyager, I played Maj Cullah for 5 episodes. He was Lieutenant Paris, and then later on he produced a show called Chuck, and I came in and I got to die horribly on that. It was fun. But anyway, in this moment where she puts the collar on him, and he's having to answer, it's like the lasso of truth, if you will. Gary said to me, "Give him a little scare, would you?" And normally I would never do something without telling another actor I was going to do it. But I knew I could keep him safe, and I wasn't going to, put him in any danger. So when I bury that knife next to his head, that was practical and it wasn't rehearsed. And we got a really nice reaction out of Robert Duncan McNeil. But it was also kind of like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to protect him in this way. But also at the same time, it's going to be damn scary to have somebody bury a knife 8 inches from your eye. But I take that kind of responsibility very seriously.
Now, what was it like working alongside Dolph Lundgren?
Oh, Dolph was terrific. Dolph's a tremendous athlete, of course. And, I got to, Walter Scott was the coordinator. I worked for Walter a bunch of times over the years. This was the first time. This was when we first met, and I worked with him again on Magnificent 7. I came in and staged sword fights for him, and we worked on Bad Girls. I came in and wrapped Madeline Stowe around the neck with the whip, and taught the actor a little bit, and grabbed Drew Barrymore in another sequence, which is kind of funny because the camera, I had to. I had to drop down as the camera went past me, and then I was essentially doing an over-the-shoulder, catching her with the whip as she's trying to run away down the way. And then the last time we worked together was on Second Hand Alliance. I did all the flashback sword play, which was kind of fun because Walter called me up and he said, they're trying to, do you know the film?
Oh, yeah.
Michael Caine and Helen Gross. Yeah, it's a delight. Yeah. With a wonderful message. I'm very proud to be a part of that. But he said they want, because it's of memory, it's Michael Caine telling Haley Joel Osment, this is what it was, and we're, rescuing princesses and all of this sort of stuff. But it's from memory, so the kid is, imagining it. They said they want it to look like Robin Hood and, the Mark of Zorro. And I went, I can do that. So I did all the flashback sword action. But anyway, Walter was the coordinator, and there's a very famous stuntman named Lauren James, who was president of Stuntman's Association. He was Steve McQueen's double for many, many years, like on Wanted Dead or Alive, which is kind of where Steve McQueen started out. And he was supposed to do the sword play, and I had worked with him on MacGyver. And he said to me, "Oh, you know more about swords than I do. You train Dolph." So I went, "Okay." So I trained Dolph, and he and I got along really well. And he saw I knew what I was doing, and I was there to help him look great. So we got a good foundation going, over about 4 weeks. we had some rehearsal and stuff in between while he was, getting prepped and doing camera tests and getting hair extensions and wardrobe and all the things that, you have to do as you're prepping for a movie. And then I didn't see him for almost a month. And I kept saying to Walter Scott, when can I see the location? Because location is like the third character in any fight, like from Russia with Love, where they're fighting in the train car, Robert Shaw and Sean Connery. It's the confines of it. It's like fighting in an elevator. Or, Jackie Chan is, very famous for, he's fighting under a train, or he's fighting on, the ledge of a roof or whatever. So the environment is very big in your choreography, or should be. And I'm going, when can I see the location? He's going, we're going to have all kinds of stuff. Quit bugging. And I'm going, yes, sir, okay. Because it was fun, because I was playing my role, but then I had also had the opportunity, to train Dolph and, to choreograph and help Walter, come up with sword action, because, Walter's, that's not his area of expertise. He's a stunt coordinator, which means he's responsible for everything. So he appreciated having somebody who understood swords, on his team. But he said, we're going to have lots of time, blah, blah, blah. Well, we did 6 weeks of location in Wilmington. What do you think was the first thing we shot on the first night we're down there? The fight sequence. So I had about an hour with Dolph and going, okay, remember that stuff I taught you a month ago? So we literally threw the choreography together in about an hour. And not the way I like to work, but, it is what it is.
Well, the sword, I wanted to ask you, the sword that Dolph is using in the film, I mean, it looks mighty heavy. I mean, and I don't know if it really was or not, but do you know about how much his sword weighed in the film?
I used to call it Buick Slayer.
Okay.
Really heavy, a little unwieldy, not terribly well balanced. Boss Films was putting stuff together, and I don't think they'd ever made swords before. And the swords had to be made because, this is 31, 32 years ago. You didn't have a lot of good swords. It wasn't something we could rent, and swords weren't nearly as popular as they are now in terms of, reenactors and people doing historical martial arts and studying. That's really come into its own in about the last 20 years. So they were making stuff, out of aluminum. My swords were pretty heavy, but at least they were shorter and their balance was a little better. The grips were a little wide. It wasn't the easiest sword to wield, but Dolph's was enormously blade heavy, and someone not as strong and athletic as Dolph wouldn't have been able to do it. But what I had been able to teach him was how to balance the sword in his hand so that by actually you can utilize gravity to become an ally instead of an adversary. The sword is supposed to balance in your hand. It's supposed to float. My favorite analogy for holding the sword comes from an old novel called Scaramouche by an author called Samuel Shelabarger. He wrote Captain from Castile and Prince of Foxes and, Scaramouche. And anyway, the guy goes to the fencing master and he says, holding the sword is like holding a bird. If you squeeze it too tight, you crush the life out of it. If you don't hold it hard enough, it flies away. So you have to it should be alive in your hand. So that was one of the things that I was very pleased I could share with Dolph in how you balance the sword. If you drop your hand, your tip lifts. If you lift your hand, your tip drops. And that, I think, helped him a lot in his manipulation of what was a very unwieldy prop, to be honest with you.
Now, I know that there was hope. At least, well, excuse me. I know that there was the the hope on behalf of the production team of Cannon Films and talk of doing a sequel. Would you have done a sequel if it went through in production?
Hell yes.
Okay.
But how? As a matter of fact, if you can get your, there is talk of doing another one. If you could ask your fans to please write in and say that they would love to see Anthony DeLongis appear, if not as Blade, then as somebody. But I'd love to come back as Blade or couple other people have suggested I'd make a good man-at-arms. I'm a little older now. But you put a weapon in my hand, I still move pretty good.
Well, you were actually, I mean, your character was one of the very few from the film to get an action figure. I mean, technically, you've had two action figures now, because there was the one that came out when the movie came out in 1987, and then they did it was awful, and then they did a remake of that particular figure a couple years back.
Well, they used to make figures where you basically changed the head, or you changed the, the little plastic dress-up armor or the the accessories that they had, the sword or the whatever the weapon happened to be. I think another one of the things, just to touch briefly on Dolph's sword again, the He-Man power sword. When you look at a little bit less so since then, you've had all these video games. I don't care much for, although I did enjoy being Marshall Lee Johnson in Red Dead Redemption. That was a motion capture that I got to play that role. So it was just because it was a camera, it was motion capture, so it was my performance. That was cool. But they have a tendency to make the swords larger than life. Like if you look at a lot of the anime stuff, I mean, you've got these swords that are like, oh my God, that it's ridiculously large, and they had a Conan game that, Ron Perlman did the voice for, and a friend of mine was playing it, and oh my God, the sword's twice as big as he is, and I think a little bit of the power sword, that they made it in epic proportions, which made it difficult for Dolph, harder for him to wield than it should have been. But again, he did it beautifully, combination of his athleticism. And again, I was happy that I could show him, here's how to get your tool to work for you instead of against you. So that was pretty cool. But, so what, before I went off on that tangent, what was the question you asked me?
Oh, just regarding the action figures that came out on your character.
First action figure was horrible. It was just like, this is kind of the same figure as everybody else, except for this face that doesn't look like me, so they don't have to pay. But, it had this, twist action to it. But, everything was very muscly. And and then a couple of years back, John Atkins and a couple of other fellows said, well, they're trying to, the fans would like a better action figure. And would you help? So I did a little video where I was pretending to be, because Blade doesn't die, and he just sort of disappears. He gets whacked and falls out of frame. And he was going, he's not dead. He's not dead. I could come back. But I said, okay, this is Blade, and I'm in disguise, as a weapons expert and, martial arts teacher in Canyon Country. And, don't let... I pulled out the old toy and I said, don't let this be my legacy. And, I guess that circulated among the fans, and they sent it to Mattel and their classic line. So the new one, I still don't get any royalties, but the new one looks like the Blade character. I mean, it's got the armor and it's got the accessories, like from the film. It's much nicer, and I have one of those too, and that's pretty cool.
Okay. A buddy of mine, I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he is a huge fan of Roadhouse, and he wanted me to ask you if you by chance had any fun stories working on set of Roadhouse.
Yeah, lots of them.
Okay.
Well, that's going to cost you a bottle of really good whiskey, and you should come up and tell you stories. Why don't you guys... get together and come up and train for a long weekend or something. And after we've trained all day with weapons, we'll have a libation out on the back porch and look at the stars, because that's what I'm doing right now. Okay.
I'll pass that along to him. So
Does he have a particular thing that a particular scene he wonders about? Oh, there is a whole other fight scene, by the way. Here's one for him.
Okay.
While Marshall Teague is fighting Sam Elliott, in the bar.
Right.
I'm busy fighting Patrick again. but we're just off screen. There's Ben Gazzara sitting over at the bar, and Patrick Swayze is next to him, and they had me come in and do this big axe kick, which basically is a vertical kick, and you drop your heel onto the top of the bar and shatter this stein of beer that's next to Patrick, and then we go at it, off in a corner. But I guess they figured that I already had 3 fights with him, so they were going to focus on the Marshall Teague Sam Elliott fight. but I'm busy fighting him again. I don't seem to learn my lesson in that movie, But I had a good time with Patrick. There was actually when he drags me out, and pulls my boot off and throws it up on the roof.
Right.
And we start fighting there. He had just come off of the big fight scene with Marshall Teague where he tears his throat out. Okay. And apparently, Marshall's quite a character. Marshall, was on the teams, and Marshall was advisor to Mel Gibson, was on the first Lethal Weapon. Marshall was a great guy and very, very skilled. Of course, he's playing the psycho, right-hand man to Ben Gazzara, and I'm sort of next in line after that. But Marshall, a little crazy. And they had their big fight. Apparently, and Patrick was trained by Benny the Jet, Benny Urquidez, a very famous ring fighter.
Yeah.
Guy, and he trained Patrick and did a great job. And Patrick was a dancer, he wasn't really a martial artist. He had skills, but so Benny trained in the music, which was kind of brilliant. But supposedly the story goes that before they had their fight scene, somebody whispered in Patrick's ear, Marshall Teague thinks you're a pussy, which wasn't true. But they kissed each other a lot, to the point where both of them for the next couple of days were limping around, and then I'm having my scene with him, and Patrick's wailing away on me, and I took him aside for a second and said, Patrick, I don't mind that you hit me in the body, I like a little contact, actually, it helps me react. But please stop driving your fist up under my manubrium, under my solar plexus. Just hit me a couple inches lower where the muscles are, okay? Sorry, man. And so we do a couple more takes. And he said, I love working with you. It's like dancing. I'm going, it's an illusion. We don't have to beat the crap out of each other. We're telling a story here, man. So there's your story.
Well, I've always thought that the playing a villain would just be so much more fun than playing a hero. I mean, would you agree? Are villains fun?
Well, yes.
Okay.
I prefer to say, well, here's a different take on it. Villains don't think they're villains. Villains think they're heroes. Villains think that the rules don't apply to them. Villains think they're special. It's just like, not my problem. Basically, they're not setting out to be evil. They just have an agenda, and the hero happens to be in their way. But I've always felt like if you don't have a strong antagonist, you don't have much of a hero. That was why, when I was facing, He-Man, Dolph, I'm going, okay, I'm his equal. I can take this guy. I've been waiting for this rematch. He got lucky the last time. And if you don't make the hero dig deep, he's not much of a hero. And the audience wants to see that. The audience wants to see that. There's some adversity here that what makes him a hero is that in spite of the odds or in spite of the adversity, he can rise to the occasion and triumph against all odds. That's what makes a good story, and that's what makes an audience stand up and cheer.
Yeah.
The fun thing about villains is the rules don't apply. So you can, and I've had the opportunity to play some very stylish villains, in
and Star Trek Voyager and Highlander, I got to play two different, immortal characters. Blade is one of my favorite roles, and I'd mentioned it was it was the last show of the first season of the original MacGyver. I was Piedra the assassin, and I came in and I was a master of disguise, and I was essentially a ninja, and at one point I'm actually holding myself up against the ceiling, with my muscles, because back then I could. And I ended up, and I did a bunch of different accents. And, it's just, they're a lot of fun, because you can be slightly larger than life, and your job is to give the hero a hard time.
Yeah. Well, you have an extremely impressive resume. I mean, you on film, you have squared off against Dolph Lundgren, Patrick Swayze, David Carradine, Jet Li. Is there anyone out there, any action stars or anyone out there who you have not had a chance to square off against or work with that you would like to?
One that you left out of that list was Joe Louis.
Joe Louis, yes.
And Jaguar Lives. But, I would, it'd be lovely to work with Jackie Chan. I'd love to work with Jason Statham. I'd love to, I just love to work. Now I've been around long enough to where I can either be the antagonist and the bad guy, or I can also be the mentor. Sort of Chris Christopherson to the other Blade character, or something. So I'm always looking for a good role, and I bring a few skills to the party too.
Are you working on anything else currently at the moment, in addition to teaching?
There's always, there's always things that we're waiting to develop. There's always, I directed three Western films of my own, Blood Trail, Trail Home, and then a little film called Duke, it's on Netflix now. It's an end-of-life story, which I'm very proud of. That's the thing, 45 years in show business, and I still don't know what my next job's going to be. But, life is good. Between the teaching and the training, and I love to do voiceover. I do a lot of voiceover, and it keeps my acting chops sharp. And I'm always looking for, an interesting project. So help me get the word out. Like you say, I've done a lot of good work. There's more in me.
Very cool. Well, hey, Mr. DeLongis, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate it, and I think I may take you up on that offer. I'd really love to maybe one day here in the near future, my family and especially my little boy will come on up, and if we can get some private one-on-one lessons with you, that would be amazing.
Would you tell your listeners, come to my website, which is www.DeLongis.com. DELONGIS.com, and they'll open a skills page. They'll open on a bio. Have them go down to the skills section, and they'll see Swordmaster, Whipmaster, horse skills, fights, and throwing. It's a fun website. And then people who are interested in training, there is a link on there to Rancho Indalo, and we both offer training for professionals, and we also do kind of an action vacation for people who always wanted to train to be their favorite action hero. So to enjoy that sort of opportunity. I enjoy teaching because teaching keeps me performance sharp. So, and I'm always learning from the people that I train.
Well, hey, that is awesome. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it. Sorry to be long-winded, but I do. This was the ultimate honor. So thank you very, very much.
My pleasure, Sean. You have a good night.
Hey, you too. Thank you, sir.